As the routine of the family settled into the rhythm of their workdays, the enchanting neighbor, Mrs. Alara Finch, seemed to weave her mesmerizing influence into the fabric of their lives more intricately than they had ever realized. Each morning, just as the sun painted the sky in soft hues, Alara's ethereal presence became a fixture on their block. The family would smile ignorance while sipping their coffee, blissfully unaware of the underlying currents that rippled through their quiet neighborhood. One fateful Tuesday, as the family departed for work, a curious incident started to unfold. Little Sam, their bright-eyed son, usually filled with energy and laughter, paused at the garden gate, his gaze fixed on Alara's house across the way. Her garden, flourishing with exotic flowers that seemed to defy the seasons, beckoned to him as if whispering secrets only he could hear. "Stay close, honey," his mother called out, unaware that this would be a day that changed everything. With every tick of the clock, while they toiled through mundane meetings and tasks, Sam found a peculiar fascination with Alara's world. He watched through the living room window each afternoon as she danced among the blooms, her hands skillfully arranging lavish bouquets that appeared at her doorstep like gifts from the earth itself. What the family found merely enchanting, Sam saw as fascinating, his innocent mind spinning stories of fairies and magic that flitted among those petals. However, it wasn't long before something unsettling began to unfold. Unbeknownst to his parents, Sam often wandered closer to Alara's sprawling garden, the vibrant colors absorbing his curiosity. With each visit, Alara greeted him warmly, her laughter ringing like chimes in the breeze. "Would you like to help me pick some flowers, dear?" she would ask, her gaze piercing yet entrancing. Sam, enchanted by her charm, would eagerly nod, not realizing the undercurrents of enchantment swirling around him. Each flower plucked carried with it a glimmer of a deeper mystery. The moment he touched them, strange visions began to dance in his mind. Whispers of distant lands and strange creatures filled him with unshakable curiosity, awakening dreams too powerful for a young boy. When he returned home, these visions clung to him, wrapping around his heart like tendrils of shadow, igniting unexpected fears and uncertainties he struggled to voice. Days turned into weeks, and while Alara's beautiful garden flourished, Sam's demeanor shifted subtly. He became withdrawn, shadows forming under his eyes that seemed to dim his once bright spirit. It went unnoticed by his parents, who were wrapped up in their work, oblivious to the emotional roller coaster their son rode each day as he ventured into the captivating yet charged atmosphere of the charming neighbor. The air grew thicker with an unknown apprehension, heavy with secrets that seemed to stretch between their home and Alara's, both enchanting and ghastly. While the family remained blissfully unaware of the enchanting illusions hiding in plain sight, Sam quietly stood at the edge of a world where innocence was fading, caught between the beguiling charm of their neighbor and the looming truths that whispered just beyond his reach, waiting to unravel at the crossroads of their lives. The games became a ritual, a blossoming tradition steeped in the golden glow of lazy afternoons. The neighbor, Mr. Holloway, seemed to emerge like clockwork. When the sun hung high in the sky, his tailored clothes immaculate against the backdrop of the weathered house, he exhibited an elegance that was both charming and enigmatic. The boy found himself magnetically drawn to Mr. Holloway's magnetic laughter and the promises woven through their time together, a world that shimmered just beyond the ordinary. At first, they played simple games. Hide and seek presented a thrilling challenge, with each hiding spot uncovering a sense of mystery, as if the very walls of the neighborhood held secrets waiting to be unveiled. The rustling leaves served as whispers, providing a soundtrack to the boy's adventurous spirit. But as the games unfolded, Mr. Holloway introduced strange twists, bending the rules in ways that caused the boy's heart to race with both excitement and unease. "This time," Mr. Holloway would say, his eyes glinting, "let's add a little magic, shall we?" One afternoon, while playing in the backyard, Mr. Holloway handed the boy a handful of colorful marbles, their surfaces shimmering like captured rainbows. "These are special," he declared, leaning closer with a conspiratorial grin. "Each one holds a wish." The boy's brow furrowed at the implication. With a deep breath, he closed his eyes tightly and whispered his wish. To be brave, to explore every corner of the world. When he opened his eyes, the marbles were still there, cool and smooth in his palm, but he couldn't shake off the feeling that wishes, in this strange context, came at a cost he couldn't comprehend. Days turned into weeks under the sun's lazy gaze, yet with each meeting, the boy noticed a disquiet stirring within him, a gnawing discomfort that accompanied the thrill of their games. Shadows danced just at the periphery of his consciousness, whispering doubts that contradicted Mr. Holloway's jovial demeanor. Sometimes, when laughter echoed across the backyard, the warmth would fade, replaced by an uneasy chill as if the shadows among the trees leaned in, curious to listen. One day, after a particularly peculiar game involving coded messages written with chalk on the sidewalk, Mr. Holloway leaned down, his face inches from the boy's. "You see, there are things hidden in plain sight," he said softly, his tone shifting into something deeper, more solemn. "Not everything is as it seems. To truly see, you must be willing to look beyond the surface." The boy felt a shiver run down his spine, grappling with a notion that felt far too profound for his tender age. His parents returned home each day with smiles and warm hugs, blissfully unaware of the transformations stirring within their son. They marveled at his newfound curiosity. He told them tales of adventures often punctuated with vivid imagination. Yet when he gazed back at the house, the thrill of his games tugged at something darker, something he secretly feared he couldn't articulate. As daylight dwindled and dusk painted the sky in shades of indigo, the boy would sit by the window, tracing the outlines of Mr. Holloway's figure retreating into the shadows of his home, a haunting silhouette that seemed to encapsulate both his longing for adventure and an unsettling allure that rippled through the boy's newfound world. As the days turned into weeks, the changes in their son became more pronounced, drawing an invisible line of concern between the parents. The vibrant laughter that once filled their home was replaced by a deep, contemplative silence. Dinner. Conversations, once lively exchanges brimming with stories and jokes, dwindled to mere exchanges of mundane details. Each evening, the family gathered around the table, and while they attempted to draw him out with questions, his responses were often minimal, as if he were physically present but mentally adrift. The father watched closely, unease creeping into his thoughts. It was almost as if a shadow descended upon their sunny household, a pall of anxiety that thickened with each silent meal shared. He often caught his son staring blankly into his plate or gazing out the window, lost in a world that his parents could not touch. The boy's eyes, usually filled with mischief and excitement, now held a distant, enigmatic quality that worried him deeply. One afternoon, compelled by a gut instinct that gnawed at him relentlessly, he began to linger near the fence that separated their property from that of their neighbor. The neighbor, Greg, had always seemed pleasant enough, waving cheerfully and exchanging idle chatter during casual encounters. However, the father started to notice the uncomfortable intensity with which Greg looked at his son, a glimmer of something he could not quite place in his demeanor. Once again, he found himself wondering if it was simple jealousy or if there was something more unsettling at play. He began to observe their interactions from the periphery, watching as Greg often called his son over for seemingly innocent chats about bugs and trees, topics that should have sparked youthful enthusiasm. Instead, his son's responses were tinged with uncertainty, as if he were caught between the polite need to engage and an innate reluctance he couldn't fully articulate. The father's heart raced as he recalled a particularly disconcerting incident from the past week. He had seen Greg kneeling beside his son, engaged in conversation, Yet the way he leaned in, the way he watched, felt too probing, too intense. The child's laughter rang out, but it sounded hollow, lacking the genuine joy it once had. It was a small moment, yet it sent chills down the father's spine. In the ensuing days, he caught a more frequent look of discomfort or wariness on his son's face whenever the neighbor approached. These brief moments of fear, evident in the subtle twitch of his lip or a slight hesitation in his gait, ignited a flame of doubt too fierce to overlook. Late at night, the father would replay the fragments of their encounters in his mind, searching for signs, certain he was not imagining a threat that loomed just beneath the surface of their idyllic suburbia. He set a decision firmly in his mind. He would not rest until he knew the truth. Whatever spell Greg had cast, whatever strange influence he had over his son, he would unravel it. That mystery, hovering ever closer, pulled taut like a frayed rope, was his to sever. The lines of trust began to fray, tangled with anxiety and a dawning realization that sometimes shadows lie, not behind us, but beside us. The evening air was thick with unspoken tension as the father stood before the neighbor's door, his pulse thundering in his ears. He had rehearsed this moment countless times, imagining all the potential outcomes. Yet, as he knocked, doubt crept in like a shadow. What if he was misreading the signs? What if he was the one being paranoid? But deep down, he knew he couldn't push aside the nagging concerns that had been festering within him for far too long. When the door swung open, the neighbor's face lit up with her usual warmth, a stark contrast to the turmoil roiling inside him. "Oh, hello! What a pleasant surprise!" she exclaimed, the lilt in her voice ringing hollow to his ears. The charm she exuded felt like a thin veil, and he couldn't shake the premonition that it might slip away if he probed too deeply. "Can we talk for a moment?" he said, forcing the words out past the tightness in his throat. Her expression shifted, just ever so slightly, revealing a flicker of uncertainty that pierced through his anxiety. It was the moment he had imagined but had hoped to avoid. Stepping into her home, he was greeted by the vibrant colors that adorned the walls, a reflection of her vivacious personality. Yet, here, where she was in control, he could sense an undertone of something darker, a tension that rippled beneath the surface of her cheerful demeanor. He took a deep breath, grounding himself before launching into the heart of the matter. "I've noticed that you and my son have been spending a lot of time together," he began, his voice steady despite the quaking of his heart. "I just want to understand your intentions." The question hung in the air, heavy and charged. Her smile faltered, almost imperceptibly, as her eyes flickered with something: fear, anger, or perhaps an emotion he hadn't yet deciphered. For a moment, it felt like the world paused, and he could almost hear the wheels turning in her mind. "He loves my garden," she replied, her tone deceptively casual. "It's just harmless fun." There it was, the classic defense, the dismissive wave of a hand masking something far more sinister. His instincts screamed at him to dig deeper. "It seems more than that, though. I can't help but feel there's something more, something you're not sharing." He watched as the tension in her body shifted, her shoulders stiffening. Suddenly, layers of her charming facade began to peel away, and he could glimpse the confusion and obsession that lay beneath. "You don't understand," she snapped, her voice rising an octave, revealing the strain in her composure. "He's special. He sees things in a way others don't. It's like he belongs with me." He could feel the air leave the room, suffocating him with a new realization. This was no mere friendship. This was a tangled web of obsession woven around his son. The revelation plunged him into a depth of dread he hadn't anticipated. Every fiber in him screamed to protect his child. And yet, here he stood in a living room filled with memories of a neighbor who had once seemed entirely harmless. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, and the revelation of her intentions ignited a primal fear within him. It was no longer just about words exchanged or time spent. It was about safeguarding his family from a force that threatened to draw them into a darkness that was not only external, but dangerously close to home. The routine that emerged from the turmoil felt like a new dawn, one that brought an inexplicable sense of purpose to the family. Mornings began with shared breakfasts, the aroma of pancakes and syrup lingering long enough to fill the house with warmth. Laughter echoed through the kitchen as they played small games while preparing for the day ahead. It was a subtle rebellion against the heaviness that had previously clouded their home, a way to mend the cracks that had begun to form in their once invincible shield of togetherness. In these moments, the father was particularly attentive, his eyes filled with determination. Each word shared over breakfast was crafted with an intention that stretched beyond just sustaining their bodies, but rather bolstering their spirits. Discussions were encouraged, and secrets became foreign. With every bite, they chewed through layers of tension, digesting the understanding that they were stronger when they remained united. The once tentative whispers about their neighbor transformed into strategic conversations about vigilance. They became a family of sentinels, eyes scanning not just their surroundings, but also one another's feelings. Evenings were dedicated to family activities, each planned with precision to ensure that their togetherness fitted snugly around the fractures caused by fear. They became avid storytellers, spinning tales from books and each other's imaginations that ignited their minds and pushed the shadows away. Every night, their son would choose a book, instigating debates on plot twists, which allowed them to escape into worlds less haunted than their own. In those moments, laughter reigned supreme, drowning out the worrying thoughts that crept like shadows in the corners of their minds. As days turned into weeks, their home transformed, from a battleground of tension to a sanctuary of love and awareness. They fortified their enclave by keeping communication fluid. The father even introduced weekly family meetings where they aired grievances and celebrated triumphs, no matter how small. No topic felt too insignificant or too daunting, and this enforced transparency built an armor of mutual understanding. Guarded secrets and muffled fears turned into words spoken in the open, sunlight splashing onto areas that had previously been shrouded in darkness. But while the family grew stronger, the neighborhood's veneer of peace began to feel thin. Occasional glimpses of the neighbors' activities reminded them that their challenges were not entirely in the past. They whispered among themselves, careful yet firm in acknowledging that the facade of normalcy could likely harbor deeper complexities. The father's voice turned vigilant. He remained watchful, not merely for his son, but for his entire family. They learned the importance of discernment, understanding that beneath charming smiles sometimes lay secrets darker than the night sky. They managed to merge careful observation into their routine, not in a paranoid way, but with a practicality that understood the balance between vigilance and the grace of everyday life. With resilience came the recognition that they had now become a part of a larger narrative, one of survival, empowerment, and the undying quest for safety, no matter the form it took. Each day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they cast their own light against the encroaching darkness, a testament to the bond they shared.